I'm Brianna, 38 years old. 3 weeks ago, at my father's funeral, my brother declared in front of 40 people that he was selling our family home to settle his gambling debts. My mother simply nodded. She actually nodded and said, "Your dad would understand. Your sister can find somewhere else." I stood there, surrounded by relatives who refused to meet my gaze, feeling as though I'd been slapped in the center of a crowded room. But here's the part they didn't know, something the lawyer was about to disclose, something my father had concealed for 15 years. Before I go on, if you find this story compelling, please take a second to like and subscribe, but only if you truly want to hear what happened next. And drop a comment. Where are you tuning in from right now? What time is it where you are? Let me take you back 3 weeks to the night the call came at 2 a.m. My phone glowed in my small studio apartment in Center City, Philadelphia, the one with the IKEA bookshelf, the snake plant I've somehow kept alive for 6 years, and stacks of accounting textbooks I still can't bear to discard. Mom's name appeared on the screen. "Your father collapsed. He's at Jefferson Memorial. Come now." I drove 45 minutes along deserted highways in my 2015 Camry, the one with the 120,000 miles and a check engine light I'd ignored for months. When I turned into the hospital lot, I saw Marcus's black Mercedes shining under the fluorescent lights. He'd arrived first, naturally, but it didn't matter. By the time I reached the ICU, Dad was already gone. The last time we'd spoken was 3 months earlier, a call that lasted barely 90 seconds. He asked, "Are you doing okay?" I said yes. Then we sat in silence until one of us invented a reason to hang up. I didn't realize that would be the final time I'd hear his voice. I was accustomed to arriving last. This time, I wished I'd arrived sooner. To grasp what unfolded at that funeral, you need to understand my family. 20 years ago, I was 18, sitting at our dining room table surrounded by college acceptance letters, Penn State, Temple, Drexel. I'd spent my entire high school years earning those envelopes, and I needed my parents' help to figure out the finances. My mother lifted the Temple letter, glanced at it, then set it aside like junk mail. "Why would we spend that kind of money on you?" she said. "You're a girl. You'll marry, have children, your husband will provide. That's how it works." I looked at my father. He stared into his coffee cup, jaw clenched, saying nothing. That same year, Marcus, 3 years older and already a sophomore at Villanova, received everything handed to him, not loans or scholarships, just checks from our parents. They bought him a Honda Accord for his commute and rented an apartment near campus so he wouldn't have to endure dorm life. I received a list of jobs that hired 18-year-olds. So I pieced it together alone. I applied for every scholarship available, secured enough to cover 70% of Temple's tuition, and worked 2 part-time jobs, weekday evenings at a call center, weekends at a coffee shop to pay the rest. 4 years of sleeping 5 hours a night, surviving on ramen because groceries felt like a luxury, watching classmates party while I picked up extra shifts. I graduated with a 3.8 GPA and a CPA license that now hangs on my apartment wall. I earned every single letter of it. That's also why I cut contact with my family for 2 years after graduation. I couldn't face them without feeling the crushing weight of everything they'd withheld from me. "Sons are the pillars of the family," my mother used to say. "Daughters are just guests passing through." I heard that line so often I began to believe it. The morning after Dad died, I drove back to the house where I grew up, the first time in 3 years. It was a colonial-style 4-bedroom in the Philadelphia suburbs, built in 1985, with a wraparound porch and a backyard where I once chased fireflies. The neighborhood was the sort where American flags adorned mailboxes, and neighbors knew one another by name. Upper middle class, respectable, the flawless exterior for a family that appeared perfect from afar. Marcus stood waiting at the front door when I arrived. He gave me a quick one-armed hug, the kind reserved for someone you feel obliged to acknowledge but prefer not to touch. "Long time, sis," he said. "You look tired." I didn't reply. I was too focused on the Louis Vuitton duffel bag in the hallway, the golf clubs propped against the wall, the Gucci loafers neatly lined up by the stairs. Marcus had been unemployed for 8 months. I knew because Mom had mentioned it during one of her infrequent guilt-laden calls. "Where's Mom?" I asked. "On the phone with the funeral home. She's got everything under control." I carried my overnight bag upstairs to what had once been my room. The pale blue walls I'd painted at 15 were unchanged, but everything else was different. My bed was gone, replaced by Marcus's overflow, more designer bags, shoe boxes, a flat-screen TV still boxed. My childhood bedroom had become my brother's storage space. I stood in the doorway, staring at the pile of luxury items belonging to a man who supposedly had no money, and a cold weight settled in my chest. I didn't ask why my room had turned into his closet. Some truths explain themselves. The funeral was set for 5 days later, exactly as Dad had wanted. Simple, at Peterson & Sons, the local funeral home he passed every day on his commute. I managed the details. I called the director, drafted the obituary, reached out to relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, arranged flowers, confirmed catering, and ensured the programs featured the right photo, the one of Dad from a decade ago, before exhaustion had settled into his face. Marcus handled the sympathy. Whenever a neighbor arrived with a casserole, he materialized in the doorway with his polished sorrow, receiving condolences like a politician working the room.
"Thank you so much for thinking of us," he'd say, hand resting on their shoulder, voice thick with practiced emotion. Dad would have appreciated it. But behind closed doors, the performance ended. I noticed it on the 3rd day. Mom and Marcus kept slipping into hushed conversations in the living room, conversations that cut off the instant I entered. I caught fragments. After the funeral, real estate, handle it quickly. On the 4th night, I was passing the kitchen when I overheard Marcus on his phone. I know, he said, his voice tight with what sounded like fear. "I'll have it soon, after this week. Just give me until—" He saw me and ended the call instantly. "Who was that?" I asked. "Nobody, work stuff." He hadn't worked in 8 months. I didn't press, but I tucked the moment away, another fragment of a puzzle I hadn't yet solved. That night, lying in the guest room staring at the ceiling, I wondered what my brother was so desperate to pay and why his fear seemed larger than his grief. The night before the funeral, sleep refused to come, so I did what I always do when my mind won't quiet. I organized. Dad had a small office in the basement, a cluttered space with a wooden desk and filing cabinets dating to the 1990s. No one had touched it since he fell ill. I thought I could at least begin sorting, make myself useful in a way that didn't require conversation. The first cabinet held tax returns and utility bills stretching back decades. The second contained old photographs, report cards, mine and Marcus's, and a folder marked important documents. Inside, I found my birth certificate, a few baby pictures, and a single sheet of paper bearing an unfamiliar logo, Farwell Family Holdings, LLC, dated 2009. I stared at it. The document was an operating agreement, dense with legal phrasing I didn't fully grasp, but my name appeared in the text, and, more startling, my signature at the bottom, loopy and tentative, unmistakably my 23-year-old handwriting. I remembered that day in 2009. Dad had called me home to sign some papers, just administrative stuff for the business, he'd said, nothing important. Fresh out of college, still trusting him despite everything, I'd signed where he pointed without reading the fine print. I'd forgotten it entirely until now. I slipped the paper into my purse, intending to ask Mom about it later. The next morning in the kitchen, when I mentioned Farwell Family Holdings, she waved it off. That company dissolved years ago. Don't waste your time digging up the past. I didn't bring it up again, but I kept the document. Something told me to hold on to it. The funeral fell on a Thursday, gray, cold, the kind of November day that presses everything heavier. Peterson & Sons was the largest funeral home in the area, its dark wood paneling and stained glass windows scattering colored light across the pews. More than 40 people attended: relatives, Dad's former colleagues from the construction company he'd managed, neighbors who recalled him as the quiet man who always shoveled their driveways after snowstorms. Marcus delivered the eulogy. He stood at the podium in a Tom Ford suit. I recognized the cut from a magazine, easily $3,000, and spoke of Dad as though they'd been inseparable. Fishing trips, fatherly advice, and unbreakable bonds between father and son. I sat in the back row listening to stories I'd never heard, wondering how many were even true. The fishing trips, perhaps, but the heart-to-heart talks, the profound connection. I'd lived in that house for 18 years and never witnessed Dad discuss anything deeper with Marcus than sports scores. Still, the crowd was moved. Women dabbed their eyes, men nodded solemnly. Marcus had always excelled at performing. Mom sat front row in black Chanel and her signature pearl necklace, the one Marcus liked to remind people he'd given her, though we all knew Dad had paid. She accepted condolences with composed dignity, the grieving widow who had everything under control. No one approached me. No one asked how I was holding up. I was background, the daughter who'd been absent too long to count. I didn't realize the eulogy was merely the prelude. The real performance came next. After the final prayer, most people began gathering coats to leave, but Marcus stepped back to the podium and cleared his throat. If I could have everyone's attention for just one more moment. The room stilled. I saw Mom give him a small, almost imperceptible nod from her seat, like a director cueing an actor. Our family has been discussing what comes next, and we've made a difficult decision. We're going to sell the family home. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Aunt Patricia, Dad's sister, pressed her hand to her chest. The house on Maple? Richard loved that house. I know, Marcus replied, shaking his head with what appeared to be genuine sorrow. But it's time for a fresh start. Mom doesn't want to stay there alone, surrounded by memories, and frankly, the upkeep is too much for her to manage by herself. He paused, letting the words settle, then added, "We've already discussed it as a family. Mom, me, and Brianna were all in agreement." My stomach lurched. I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't even been consulted. I started to rise, to speak, but Mom turned and fixed her eyes on me. Sharp, warning, don't you dare make a scene. "The house will be listed next month," Marcus continued. "Just wanted everyone to know so there are no surprises." After the announcement, people swarmed Mom with sympathy. Such a hard decision. Richard would understand. You have to do what's best for the family. No one asked my opinion. I stood frozen in the back, watching my childhood home sold off at my father's funeral, and I said nothing. But Marcus wasn't finished. He glanced toward Mom, and she arose from her seat, as though they'd rehearsed this moment too. "I want to add something," she said, smoothing the folds of her black dress as she stepped to the front. "I know some of you may be wondering about Brianna's situation." My face burned. 40 pairs of eyes swung toward me. "Brianna is a strong, independent young woman," Mom continued, using the same measured tone she once employed to explain why we couldn't afford something she had no intention of buying. "She has a solid job, her own apartment. She moved away years ago and built a life for herself. Richard would be proud of that." She paused, tilting her head with a practiced look of sorrow. "She doesn't need the house, not the way Marcus does. He's faced some setbacks. He needs family support right now. I'm sure you all understand." Someone, I think it was Aunt Dorothy, whispered just loud enough to carry, "Well, she did abandon them for years." "Your dad would understand," Mom said, locking eyes with me. "Your sister can find another place." The words struck like a physical slap. In front of our entire extended family, she had just declared that I deserved nothing, that I was an afterthought, that the fate of my childhood home was none of my concern. A distant cousin, Barbara, leaned toward me. "You know your mother's right, honey. You've done so well for yourself. Marcus needs the help more than you do."
I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand and recount the scholarships I'd clawed for, the endless jobs, the years I'd spent building everything from scratch while Marcus drained every resource our parents offered. But I stayed silent, shrinking smaller than I had in years. After the service, I slipped outside while the others lingered to mingle. The November air bit sharply, but I welcomed it, anything to breathe something besides betrayal. Through the window, I watched Marcus shake hands with a man in a tailored gray suit. They exchanged business cards. The man passed Marcus a folder emblazoned with a real estate agency logo. He had brought a realtor to the funeral. Mom appeared beside them, gesturing toward the door as though giving directions. Minutes later, I saw the three of them climb into separate cars and drive off, toward the house. They were showing the property before Dad was even in the ground. Back inside, retrieving my purse, I overheard Aunt Dorothy speaking to a cluster of cousins. Well, what do you expect? Brianna abandoned them, didn't call, didn't visit for years, and now she wants to show up and claim something? Blood doesn't work that way. I froze behind a pillar, hidden, listening. Her poor mother, another voice added, having to deal with a daughter like that on top of losing her husband? At least Marcus stayed. He's been there for Linda through everything. I thought of all the calls I'd made, only to be told Mom was busy, all the holidays I'd offered to visit, only to hear, we're keeping it small this year. Every bridge I'd tried to rebuild, they had quietly torched. On my way out, I noticed a new sign staked on the funeral home's front lawn, a real estate placard with a "Coming Soon" banner. They had planned this for a while, and no one had bothered to tell me. I took a photo of the sign. Evidence, I told myself, though I wasn't yet sure for what. That night, I tried to confront them. The house was quiet. Most relatives had returned to hotels or homes, leaving just the three of us. Mom sat in Dad's leather armchair. Marcus sprawled on the couch. I stood in the doorway like a guest in my own childhood home. I need to ask you something about selling the house. Mom glanced up from her phone. What about it? You said we all agreed. We didn't. No one asked me anything. Marcus let out a short, dismissive laugh. Come on, Bree. You haven't been part of this family in years. What do you care what happens to it? I care because it's our family home, because Dad died 4 days ago and you're already showing it to buyers, because I have just as much right to be part of this decision as either of you. Mom's face hardened. You have no right. You walked away. You didn't call, didn't visit for years, and now you want to show up and demand a say? I called. You said you didn't need me. We didn't need your guilt. We needed your presence. Marcus sat forward, regarding me with something close to pity. Look, I'll be honest. I need the money from this house. I've got investment debts, a lot of them. And if you make a scene, I'll tell everyone exactly what kind of daughter you've been, how you cut Dad off for 2 years, how you broke his heart. My throat closed. That was my deepest shame, the years I'd refused contact, and now Marcus had turned it into a weapon. I'm trying to help the family. You're trying to tear it apart. I left the room without another word, but I didn't leave the house. Not yet. I know what you're probably thinking. Why didn't I fight back? Why didn't I call a lawyer right then? Here's what you have to understand. These were my mother, my brother, the people I'd spent my childhood trying to earn love from. Walking away from them had already shattered something inside me once. I wasn't ready to do it again. If you've ever faced a moment like this, where standing up for yourself meant risking everyone you'd ever known, please drop a comment below. Tell me I'm not alone, and if you want to hear what happened next, stay with me. 3 days after the funeral, Mom called another family gathering at the house to discuss the estate, she said, so everyone's on the same page. 15 people crowded into the dining room. Aunt Dorothy, Uncle Frank, my grandmother on Mom's side, cousins I barely recognized. The room felt smaller than I remembered, packed with bodies, opinions, and the heavy weight of decisions already made without me. Mom stood at the head of the table, a stack of papers before her. Marcus sat to her right, arms crossed, watching me like I was a problem to be contained. "Here's the situation," Mom began. "Richard didn't leave a complicated estate. The house is the primary asset, valued at around $800,000. My plan is to sell it, clear the outstanding debts, and use whatever remains to support myself in retirement." "What about Brianna?" Grandma asked. She was the only one at the table who met my eyes without judgment. Mom answered smoothly, without hesitation. "Brianna has her own career. She doesn't need support. She moved out years ago and built a life entirely on her own. I'm proud of her for that." "But she's still your daughter," Grandma pressed gently. "Richard's daughter." Aunt Dorothy, Mom's sister, cut in quickly. "With all due respect, Mother, Brianna hasn't exactly been present. She cut ties with this family. You can't walk away for years and then come back expecting a share." "I'm not asking for anything," I said, my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. "I'm asking to be included in decisions about my own family's property." "You are included," Marcus replied, offering a thin, patronizing smile. "You're sitting right here, aren't you?" Uncomfortable laughter rippled around the table. My face burned. No one spoke up. Not one person defended my right to a voice. Grandma caught my gaze for a brief second, then looked away, her lips pressed into a tight line. The true purpose of the meeting emerged an hour later. Marcus slid a document across the table toward me. The header read, "Disclaimer of interest in estate property." "What is this?" I asked. "It's simple," Mom said. "You sign it, and you formally release any claim to the house or the proceeds from its sale. It keeps everything clean, protects everyone involved." I stared at the paper. "You want me to give up my inheritance?" "You're not giving up anything," Marcus said. "Dad didn't leave you anything in his will. This just makes it official so we can move forward without complications." "How do you know what Dad left me?" Marcus exchanged a quick glance with Mom. "We had the will reviewed by a lawyer. The house goes to Mom, that's it. This is just paperwork." "If I already have no claim, why do you need my signature?" His jaw tightened. "Because we want this handled quickly. The buyer's ready. We don't need some estranged daughter resurfacing in 6 months claiming she deserves a portion." "And if I don't sign?" Mom leaned forward. "Then I'll tell everyone in this room and everyone who wasn't here exactly what kind of daughter you've been, how you abandoned your father for 2 years when he needed you most, how you broke his heart." The same threat Marcus had wielded. They had clearly rehearsed this. "Sign the paper, Brianna," Uncle Frank said quietly. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Every eye was on me, waiting. I picked up the pen, Dad's Mont Blanc, the one he'd received for his 20-year work anniversary, and held it over the signature line. Then I set it down. "I need time to think," I said. Marcus's smile vanished. "You have 24 hours." I drove back to my apartment that night feeling as though I'd already lost. The studio seemed emptier than ever. I sat on my second-hand couch in the dark, streetlights throwing long shadows across the floor, and turned the options over my mind. Signing would be the easiest path. Surrender whatever claim I might have, walk away, let them take the house. No more family meetings, no more accusations, no more feeling like an outsider in my own bloodline. But something inside refused. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps it was the memory of all those double shifts I'd worked to pay for a degree my parents wouldn't fund. Or perhaps it was the way Mom had declared to 40 people that I didn't matter. Or perhaps it was the single sheet of paper still folded in my purse, the one bearing the unfamiliar logo, Farwell Family Holdings, LLC. I pulled it out and studied it again in the dim light. My signature stared back at me, loopy and youthful from 15 years earlier. Dad had asked me to sign, and I had, trusting him completely, without reading the fine print. What exactly did I sign? I considered calling a lawyer, but it was nearly midnight, and I had no idea where to begin. Then I remembered the name printed in Dad's funeral program, Gerald Whittemore, estate attorney, Henderson Family Counsel for 20 years. I found the number in Dad's old address book, which I'd quietly taken from his basement office along with a few other small items. Tomorrow, I decided, tomorrow I would call Gerald Whittemore and ask what Farwell Family Holdings, LLC truly meant. If I was going to lose everything, at least I wanted the truth first. Gerald Whittemore's office occupied the fourth floor of a brick building in downtown Philadelphia, a quiet place with brass nameplates, Persian rugs, and the faint scent of aged paper and leather. He was older than I'd pictured, late 60s, white hair, wire-rimmed glasses that gave him the look of a gentle grandfather, but his eyes were keen and alert when he shook my hand. "Miss Henderson," he said, "I was hoping you'd call." That caught me off guard. "Were you? Please, sit." He gestured to a deep leather chair across from his desk. "I've been your father's estate attorney for 20 years. He and I had an understanding." I drew the LLC document from my bag and placed it on the desk. "I found this in his files. I don't understand what it means, but it has my name on it." Whittemore picked it up. A flicker crossed his face. Recognition, perhaps even relief. "Do you know about Farwell Family Holdings, LLC? My mother said the company dissolved years ago." "Your mother is mistaken." He opened a drawer and withdrew a thick, meticulously organized manila folder, as though he'd been waiting for this moment. "Miss Henderson, there's something your father instructed me to tell you, but only when the time was right." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "The family house, the one on Maple Street, it is not part of your father's estate." "What?" "In 2009, your father transferred the property into Farwell Family Holdings, LLC. The house belongs to the LLC, not to him personally." I stared at him. "Then who owns the LLC?" Whittemore met my gaze over the rim of his glasses. "You do, Miss Henderson. You are the sole member. You have been for 15 years. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. "That's not possible," I finally managed. "I would have known. Someone would have told me." Whittemore shook his head slowly. "Your father was very specific about confidentiality. He didn't want anyone to know, not your mother, not your brother, not even you, until it became necessary."
"But why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Whittemore reached into the folder again and withdrew another document, older, the paper faintly yellowed at the edges. "In 2008, your father came to me with growing concerns. He'd begun noticing troubling changes in Marcus's behavior. Gambling, mounting debts, the early signs of what would become a serious addiction." I thought immediately of Marcus's hushed, fearful phone call at the funeral home, the tight edge of panic in his voice. "Your father loved your brother deeply," Whittemore continued, "but he no longer trusted him with the family's future. He knew that if anything happened to him, Marcus would find ways to liquidate every asset, bit by bit. So he devised a structure to safeguard the single most valuable piece, the house." He tapped the older document gently. "Yes, in 2009, he transferred title into Farwell Family Holdings, LLC, and named you, and only you, as the sole member. The operating agreement is airtight, properly notarized, filed with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and kept in full compliance every year since. He paid the annual fees from a small, dedicated fund he established precisely for that purpose. He anticipated everything." Tears stung my eyes. All those years I'd believed Dad didn't care. Every long silence I'd read as indifference, and all along he had quietly constructed a shield around me. "Your father was never eloquent with words," Whittemore said softly, "but he was meticulous with documents. This was his way of expressing what he couldn't say aloud." I wiped my cheeks with the back of my hand. "What do I do now?" "Now," he replied, "we set the record straight." Whittemore let me remain in his office as long as I needed. He brewed Earl Grey in delicate china cups that looked inherited from his grandmother, then sat quietly while the reality settled over me. For the first time since Dad's death, I allowed myself to truly cry, not the restrained tears of the funeral, but raw, heaving sobs that rose from somewhere deep and long buried. Grief, relief, confusion, they knotted together until I could hardly breathe. Dad had seen me. All those times he'd remained silent while Mom dismissed me, all the holidays when Marcus was celebrated and I was merely endured, I had mistaken his quiet for agreement, for proof that he valued me less. But that hadn't been it at all.
He simply hadn't known how to defend me in words, so he defended me on paper. Whitmore slid a sealed envelope across the desk. My name was written on the front in Dad's familiar handwriting, shaky now, the letters uneven, as though his hand had trembled when he formed them. "He gave me this 3 months ago," Whitmore said clearly. "Asked me to hold it until you needed it most." I didn't open it there. I wasn't ready. But I traced my thumb over the ink of my name and felt something fundamental shift inside me. "There will be a formal will reading," Whitmore continued. "I'll arrange it for Friday. I'll invite everyone who attended that family meeting." "They'll fight this," I said. "They'll claim I manipulated him or that the documents are forged." "Let them claim whatever they like." He opened another folder, this one thick with receipts, notarized signatures, state filing confirmations. "I've been preparing for this eventuality for 15 years. The paper trail is impeccable." For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in my chest. "How would you like to proceed?" he asked. The tea had cooled, but my thoughts had sharpened. "I could tell them privately," I said. "Pull Mom and Marcus aside, explain everything quietly, avoid a public confrontation." "You could," Whitmore agreed. "That would be the more diplomatic path." But then I remembered the funeral announcement, the orchestrated family meeting, the deliberate humiliation in front of 40 people who had watched me grow up. They chose spectacle to paint me as the ungrateful outsider. "They didn't extend me that courtesy," I said. "They chose to do this publicly, to make me look small in front of everyone. So I'd like the truth to come out the same way the lies did." Whitmore nodded slowly, a quiet respect in his eyes. "There will be a formal reading," he said. "I'll arrange it for Friday at 10 a.m. I'll invite your mother, your brother, your aunts, uncles, grandmother, everyone from that meeting. They'll assume it's routine procedure." "Will you need anything from me?" "Just be there. Bring the original document you found. I'll handle the presentation." He paused, then added, "There's someone else who may prove helpful. Patricia Callahan, your father's long-term accountant. She witnessed the LLC's formation. If your family questions the document's authenticity, she can confirm everything. She's been waiting for this moment. She always held you in high regard, Miss Henderson, and she understood your father's intentions perfectly." I left Whitmore's office carrying something I hadn't felt in years: certainty. I wouldn't fight this with shouts, tears, or pleas for them to finally see me. I would let the paperwork speak, calm, irrefutable, and louder than any accusation they could muster. Patricia Callahan lived in a modest townhouse in Conshohocken, the sort of place with window boxes bursting with late-season mums and a welcome mat that felt sincere. She was in her late 50s, silver threading through her dout hair, her face warm and open in the way that invites confidences. "Your father talked about you constantly. Did you know that?" I shook my head. "No." "Every milestone, passing your CPA exam, earning a promotion, he found a way to mention it. 'My daughter's doing well,' he'd say. 'She's made something of herself.'" My throat closed. Then why didn't he ever tell me? "Because Richard Henderson was the most emotionally reserved man I've ever known." She said it with fondness, not judgment. "He grew up believing feelings were a liability. He didn't know how to say, 'I love you,' so he showed it in the only language he trusted: balance sheets, legal filings, careful planning." The LLC. I was there when he created it. I witnessed the signatures, assisted with the filings. He made me swear not to breathe a word, not to you, not to anyone, unless the situation demanded it. And now the situation demands it. Your mother and brother are preparing to sell a house that doesn't belong to them. I'd call that more than sufficient reason. She set down her teacup and met my eyes directly. "Your father wasn't perfect, Brianna. But in the end, he chose you. Don't let them take that from you." I nodded. I wouldn't. The night before the will reading, Marcus called. 24 hours is up," he said. "Have you decided?" I was sitting on my bed, Dad's unopened letters still resting on the nightstand. "I'll be at the reading tomorrow." "Good." I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Bring a pen. We'll wrap this up and everyone can move on." "I'll see you there, Marcus." After he hung up, Mom called. Her tone had shifted, quieter, almost pleading. "Brianna, I know things have been strained between us, but please understand, this isn't about excluding you. It's about survival. Marcus has gotten himself into serious trouble, and if we don't help him, people could get hurt." "What kind of trouble?" She hesitated. "He owes money to dangerous people. A lot of money. Over $300,000, closer to $350,000. I've already given him everything I had saved. The house was supposed to be the last resort." So there it was, roughly $340,000 in gambling debts. My brother had hollowed himself out chasing losses that never resolved. "I'm sorry Marcus is struggling," I said, "but selling Dad's house, my house, isn't going to fix him. It will only enable him to keep going." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. I'll see you tomorrow, Mom." I ended the call and finally opened Dad's letter. His handwriting was unsteady, the letters uneven, but every word carried weight. "Brianna, I know your mother and brother haven't treated you fairly. I'm sorry I never found the courage to say it aloud. I wasn't a good father in the ways that mattered most, but I tried to leave you something they couldn't touch. You're the only one I trust with what truly matters. Dad." I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the inner pocket of my blazer. Tomorrow, I wouldn't need to say much. The documents would speak for themselves. Friday morning, 10 a.m., Gerald Whittemore's office. The conference room was larger than his private suite, dominated by a long mahogany table that could seat 12 comfortably. Oil paintings of Philadelphia landmarks hung on the walls, and a crystal chandelier overhead scattered soft prisms across the polished surface. I arrived at 9:45 and found Whittemore already preparing, folders neatly aligned at his place, a glass of water at each seat, the projector standing ready if needed. "Are you ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." The family began arriving at 9:59. Mom entered first, dressed in black again, this time a sleek designer dress I didn't recognize, the familiar pearl necklace catching the light at her throat. She gave me the briefest glance before claiming the chair at the far end of the table. Marcus arrived 15 minutes late, because of course you did, still in the Tom Ford suit, freshly pressed, as though this were a deal-closing negotiation. He clapped Whittemore on the shoulder like they were longtime golf buddies. "Thanks for putting this together, Jerry. Let's keep it quick." Uncle Frank, Aunt Dorothy, Grandma, and a few cousins followed, the same group from the family meeting, here to witness what they believed would be my final concession. Marcus caught my eye across the table and winked. Actually winked, as if we were in on the same private joke. "Brought a pen this time?" I didn't reply. I simply smoothed the navy blazer I'd earned with my first major promotion, the one I'd bought entirely with my own money, and waited. Whittemore closed the door and took his seat at the head of the table. "Shall we begin?" I have to pause here for a moment because this was the instant I'd waited for my entire life. Not out of revenge. I want to be very clear. I wasn't sitting in that room fantasizing about making my family suffer. I was waiting to be seen, to be acknowledged, to have someone, after 38 years, finally stand up and affirm that I mattered. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like no achievement was ever enough to earn a real place at the table, then you know exactly how I felt in that chair. Like and comment if you're still with me. Stay close. What happened next changed everything. Whittemore started with the standard formalities, confirming identities, explaining the purpose of the reading, outlining the basic framework of Dad's estate. "Richard Henderson's will is straightforward," he said, turning pages in his folder. "Personal effects are to be distributed among family members at Mrs. Henderson's discretion. His vehicle, a 2018 Honda Accord, goes to Marcus. Savings accounts totaling approximately $47,000 passed to his wife Linda." Mom nodded, visibly satisfied. Marcus leaned back with the relaxed confidence of someone watching a favorite horse surge into the lead. "And the house?" Aunt Dorothy prompted. The Maple Street property? Whittemore paused. He removed his glasses, polished them deliberately on his tie, then replaced them, a small, calculated gesture I would later recognize as intentional. Regarding the house, he said slowly, there is an issue. The room fell silent. Marcus straightened. What kind of issue? Mom's voice sharpened. What do you mean? The property on Maple Street is not part of Mr. Henderson's personal estate. That's absurd, Marcus snapped. He owned that house for 30 years. He lived in that house for 30 years, Whittemore corrected evenly, but ownership transferred in 2009. The property is held by a limited liability company known as Farwell Family Holdings, LLC. I watched the color drain from my mother's face. Marcus looked bewildered, as though someone had suddenly begun speaking in a foreign tongue. What the hell is Farwell Family Holdings? He demanded. Whittemore drew a thick folder from under his notes. On the cover, in Dad's precise handwriting, was a single label: Property Documents Do Not Destroy. I think we need to discuss the corporate structure your father established 15 years ago. He began laying out the documents one by one, spreading them across the table like a dealer revealing a winning hand. In 2009, Richard Henderson transferred the Maple Street property into a limited liability company. The LLC was properly formed under Pennsylvania law. The transfer was duly recorded with the County Recorder of Deeds, and all annual taxes, registration fees, and compliance filings have been paid in full every year.
She set down her teacup and met my eyes directly. Your father wasn't perfect, Brianna, but in the end he chose you. Don't let them take that from you. I nodded. I wouldn't. The night before the will reading, Marcus called. 24 hours is up, he said. Have you decided? I sat on my bed, Dad's unopened letter still on the nightstand. I'll be at the reading tomorrow. Good. Satisfaction laced his voice. Bring a pen. We'll wrap this up and everyone can move on. I'll see you there, Marcus. Mom called next. Her tone had softened, almost pleading. Brianna, I know things have been difficult, but please understand, this isn't about pushing you out. It's about survival. Marcus is in real trouble, and if we don't help him, people could get hurt. What kind of trouble? A pause. He owes money to dangerous people. A lot. Over $300,000, closer to $350,000. I've already given him everything I had saved. The house was supposed to be the final option. So the figure was roughly $340,000 in gambling debts. My brother had hollowed himself chasing illusions that never paid off. I'm sorry Marcus is struggling, I said, but selling Dad's house, my house, won't fix him. It will only let him keep going. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I'll see you tomorrow, Mom. I ended the call and at last opened Dad's letter. His handwriting trembled across the page, but the words stood firm. Brianna, I know your mother and brother haven't treated you fairly. I'm sorry I never found the courage to say it aloud. I wasn't a good father in the ways that mattered most, but I tried to leave you something they couldn't touch. You're the only one I trust with what truly matters. Dad. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my blazer pocket. Tomorrow, the documents would speak louder than I ever could. Friday morning, 10 a.m., Gerald Whitmore's conference room. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier's prismatic light. Oil paintings of Philadelphia landmarks watched from the walls. I arrived at 9:45. Whitmore was already arranging folders, placing water glasses, readying the projector. Are you ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. The family filtered in starting at 9:55. Mom arrived first, in black again, a sleek designer dress, pearls gleaming, barely glancing at me before taking the far end of the table. Marcus sauntered in 15 minutes late, Tom Ford's suit crisp, clapping Whitmore on the shoulder like old friends. Thanks for putting this together, Jerry. Let's keep it quick.
Uncle Frank, Aunt Dorothy, Grandma, and several cousins followed, the same group from the family meeting, expecting my final surrender. Marcus caught my eye and winked. Brought a pen this time? I smoothed my navy blazer, the one I'd earned with my first promotion, and waited. Whitmore closed the door and took his seat. Shall we begin? I pause here because this was the moment I'd waited for my whole life. Not for revenge. I need to be clear. I wasn't dreaming of making them suffer. I was waiting to be seen, to be acknowledged, to have someone, after 38 years, finally affirm that I mattered. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like no accomplishment was ever enough, you know exactly how I felt in that chair. Like and comment if you're still with me. Stay close. What happened next changed everything. Whitmore handled the formalities, identities confirmed, purpose explained, estate outlined. Richard Henderson's will is straightforward. Personal effects to family at Mrs. Henderson's discretion. The 2018 Honda Accord to Marcus. Savings accounts approximately $47,000 to his wife, Linda. Mom nodded, satisfied. Marcus leaned back, smug. And the house? Aunt Dorothy asked. The Maple Street property? Whitmore paused, removed his glasses, polished them on his tie, replaced them. A deliberate gesture. Regarding the house, he said slowly, there is an issue. Silence fell. Marcus straightened. What kind of issue? The property on Maple Street is not part of Mr. Henderson's personal estate. That's ridiculous, Marcus snapped. He owned it for 30 years. He lived in it for 30 years, Whitmore corrected. Ownership transferred in 2009. The property is held by Farewell Family Holdings, LLC. Color drained from Mom's face. Marcus looked bewildered. What the hell is Farewell Family Holdings? He demanded. Whitmore drew a thick folder labeled in Dad's neat script, Property Documents, Do Not Destroy. He laid the documents methodically. In 2009, Richard Henderson transferred the Maple Street property into a limited liability company. The LLC was properly formed under Pennsylvania law. The transfer was recorded with the county, and all taxes, fees, and compliance filings have been paid every year since. So the company owns the house. Fine. Who owns the company? The operating agreement designates a single member, one person with complete control over the LLC and all its assets. Whitmore looked directly at me. Every head turned to follow his gaze. That person is Brianna Henderson. Silence held for exactly 3 seconds. Then Marcus shot out of his chair. That's... His face flushed crimson. She manipulated him. She got to him when he was sick and confused. The documents were executed in 2009, Whitmore said evenly. Your father was 53, in perfect health. The signatures were notarized by a licensed notary and witnessed by his accountant, who is prepared to testify to his full competence. I don't believe this. Marcus snatched a document, hands shaking as he scanned it. This is fraud. This is your father's choice, Whitmore said. Deliberate, maintained, and legally binding. Mom spoke at last, voice a whisper. He never told me. 25 years of marriage, and he never said a word. He asked me to keep it confidential, Whitmore replied. I honored that. I sat still, feeling 4 decades of family dynamics tilt in real time. My aunts stared. Grandma's eyes glistened. Marcus looked ready to overturn the table. The house is worth nearly $900,000. It belongs to the family. It belongs to the LLC, Whitmore corrected, and the LLC belongs to your sister. Mom turned to me, expression raw, betrayal and desperation aging her beyond her 67 years. You knew. This whole time you knew. I found a document in Dad's office and didn't understand it. I called Mr. Whitmore to ask. He told me the truth. A truth neither of you shared because you'd already decided I didn't deserve a voice in this family's decisions. Mom's composure fractured. We need that money, Brianna. Marcus is in real trouble. Real trouble. He owes people who don't negotiate. How much? Uncle Frank asked, frowning. Marcus stayed silent, so I answered. $340,000 in gambling debts. The room erupted. Aunt Dorothy's hand flew to her chest. A cousin muttered, Jesus Christ! Uncle Frank stared at Marcus as though seeing him for the first time. That's not accurate, Marcus stammered. It's investments, not... I've been covering for him for years, Mom said, voice breaking. I've given him everything. The house was the last resort. She looked at me, eyes red-rimmed. Your father's only been gone 2 weeks, and you're going to take our home? I'm not taking anything. I'm claiming what Dad left me, the same way you've claimed everything he left you. The difference is, he made sure this couldn't be taken away. The pearls at her throat caught the light as she bowed her head. For the first time, I'd said something she couldn't counter. I stood. Attention snapped at me, hostile, curious, neutral. I'm not here to gloat, I said, voice steady despite my pounding heart. And I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here because Dad wanted me to have this. He decided when I was 23 and kept it a secret for 15 years. That tells me what he believed. It tells me he saw what was coming. Marcus spat. It tells me he was manipulated. I met my brother's eyes. He knew you'd burn through everything if given the chance, and he was right. Marcus lunged forward. For a second, I thought he might strike. Uncle Frank seized his arm. Sit down, Uncle Frank said. You've done enough damage. I turned to Mom. You can stay in the house. I won't put you on the street, but it will be under a formal lease, $1 a month, renewable yearly at my discretion. $1 a month? She repeated faintly. And Marcus doesn't live there. That's non-negotiable. You can't. I can. The house belongs to my LLC. I decide who lives in it. Silence blanketed the room. I could almost hear the mental recalculations, the old certainties crumbling. Marcus needs help, I said, softer now. Real help, not money to feed bookmakers. If he wants treatment for his addiction, I'll support that, but I won't enable him to destroy himself. I gathered my bag and looked around the table one last time. I didn't ask for this, but I won't apologize for accepting what my father chose to give me. Then I walked out. Halfway down the hallway, footsteps followed.
A real smile, the kind I remembered from childhood, curved her lips. You remind me of your grandfather. He was stubborn, too, in the best possible way. She patted my cheek gently, then turned back toward the conference room. Go home, sweetheart. You've earned a rest. I'll handle what's left in there. I was almost to my car when Marcus caught up. Brianna, wait, please. I stopped, but didn't turn. His breathing came ragged, uneven, as though he'd sprinted the distance. I know you're angry, he said. You have every right, but you don't understand what's happening. Then explain it. He stepped around to face me. For the first time, the polished exterior cracked. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His hands trembled, the desperation of someone who had finally run out of moves. The people I owe, he said, voice low and frayed. They're not patient. They've been tailing me, leaving notes on my windshield. Last week, someone slashed my tires. Bree, I'm scared. His voice cracked on the last word. I got in over my head, kept thinking one more bet, one more game, and I'd win it all back. It never happened. Now I'm so deep I can't see daylight. I studied him, really studied him. The brother who'd been handed every advantage I'd fought tooth and nail for, who'd squandered it all and still expected rescue. Beneath the wreckage, though, I glimpsed the boy who once played catch with me in the backyard, the teenager who walked me to school when older kids scared me, before everything soured. You need rehab, not money. 90 days minimum. A real program, not some luxury weekend retreat. He nodded without meeting my eyes. I know. If you commit, truly commit to getting help, then we can talk about what comes next, but not before. And if you don't, you're on your own. Mom was waiting by my car. She must have slipped out a side door while I spoke with Marcus. Makeup streaked, careful mask gone, she looked diminished, Grief and shock had pressed years into her face. "Did he leave anything for me?" she asked quietly. "In that folder of his? Any message, any explanation from Richard?" I could have lied, invented a tender note of forgiveness and reconciliation, but she didn't deserve fiction. She deserved the truth. "No," I said, "he didn't mention you at all." She flinched as though I'd struck her. 35 years? I gave him 35 years of my life, and he left everything to... He left the house to me, I said, not because he loved me more, but because he knew you and Marcus would burn through it, and he was right. I was doing what I thought was best for the family. You were doing what was best for Marcus. There's a difference. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Something shifted in her eyes, not full acceptance, but the faint dawn of recognition. I raised him the way I was raised. Sons are investments, daughters are temporary. That's what my mother taught me. Grandma seems to have changed her mind. A bitter little laugh escaped her. She always liked you better. Maybe she just saw me more clearly. Mom reached up, unclasped the pearl necklace she'd worn every day for as long as I can remember, and held it in her open palm for a long moment. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. "Neither do I admitted, "but maybe that's where we start." She didn't reply. She simply walked away, pearls cradled in her hand, leaving me alone in the parking lot with the sudden, heavy stillness of everything that had just shifted. The will reading dispersed slowly after I left. I heard the rest later from Grandma and Whitmore. Aunt Dorothy tried one last time to argue the LLC was fraudulent. Whitmore dismantled her with a meticulous trail of documents, 15 years of notarized signatures, state filings, annual compliance reports, every I dotted, every T crossed. Uncle Frank pulled Marcus aside and told him plainly he was a disappointment. Harsh, perhaps, but Marcus only nodded. He was too hollowed out to argue. Patricia Callahan called that evening. "You handled it beautifully," she said. "Your father would have been so proud." I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest part. She described how the family trickled out. A few stopped to shake Whitmore's hand and murmur apologies for their earlier assumptions. Several cousins had texted me. I hadn't checked my phone yet. "Your grandmother stayed until the very end," she added. "She wanted to make sure the message landed. She told your mother, 'You did this to yourself, Linda. Don't blame the child.'" I smiled. Despite everything, Grandma had always possessed a spine of tempered steel, even when the rest of us faltered. 2 days later, Whitmore's office delivered a formal package: the original operating agreement, the property deed, the keys to the Maple Street house, all of it now officially, publicly mine. I held the keys in my palm, the same brass ring Dad had carried for 30 years, worn leather fob attached, a tiny window holding a faded photo of me at 5. He'd been carrying my picture the whole time. I'd simply never known where to look. 2 weeks later, I moved back into the house on Maple Street. Not permanently, not yet. I kept my city apartment for work, but I began spending weekends there, clearing clutter, repairing what Dad had let slide in his final months. The first task was my old bedroom. Marcus's designer luggage, shoe boxes stuffed with sneakers he couldn't afford, the flat-screen TV still boxed. Everything went to the garage. He could collect it whenever he chose, but it no longer belonged in my space. Then I repainted the walls soft sage green, a color I'd always wanted, but never asked for. Mom occupied the guest room now, under the lease we'd drawn, $1 a month. She was quiet most days. We didn't speak much, but we didn't fight either. It was an awkward, fragile peace, unexpected, but real. Marcus checked himself into a 90-day inpatient program in New Jersey, a legitimate one with group therapy, addiction counseling, and no phone access. For the first time in years, the future felt like something I could shape, not something I had to survive.
I didn't visit, but I sent a letter. Only one line. "I'm rooting for you." He wrote back 2 weeks later. 2 words. "Thank you." On Sundays now, I have dinner with Grandma. She arrives with a casserole or a pie, and we sit in the kitchen where I once hunched over homework. She tells me stories about my grandfather, the stubborn man I apparently inherited more from than I ever realized. The house feels different these days, lighter, as though it had been holding its breath for decades and finally learned how to exhale. I keep fresh flowers on the mantel beside Dad's photo, yellow roses, his favorite. Last night, I sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, cradling a mug of ginger tea, the same kind Dad used to drink every evening, though I only discovered that when I found his favorite mug tucked at the back of the cabinet. I've read his letter 100 times now. The paper is thinning at the creases from so much folding and unfolding, but the final line remains sharp. You're the only one I trust with what matters. For so long, I believed my father didn't love me. I took his silence as evidence that I wasn't worth defending, that I was as invisible to him as I was to everyone else in that house. But I had it backwards. Dad didn't know how to love out loud. He grew up in a world where emotions were liabilities and actions were the only currency that counted. So he loved me the only way he knew how, by quietly building a fortress around me when words failed him. I used to think strength meant shouting, fighting, demanding to be noticed. Now I see it another way. Sometimes strength is patience. Sometimes it's constructing protection so silently that no one realizes it exists until the walls are already unbreakable. I won't pretend everything is resolved. Mom and I are still learning how to share space without old wounds reopening. Marcus has 84 days left in rehab, and I don't yet know who he'll be when he walks out. Some relatives still whisper that I manipulated a dying man, but I know the truth, and that is enough. Dad never once said, "I love you," but he wrote my name on every document that carried weight. He gave me the house I grew up in, the security my mother tried to claim, and a future no one could take. That was his language of love, and at last I heard it clearly. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if no accomplishment ever felt like enough to earn a real place at the table, I want you to hear this. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be valued. And protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. If this story touched something in you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It means more than you know. And if you carry your own story, of family, boundaries, or finally standing up for the person you've become, share it in the comments. I'd truly love to read it. Check the description for more stories like this one. Until next time, be kind to yourself. You've earned it.